Would you like to know the first thought I had after finally completing The Last of Us 2?
Well, that didn't suck.
As a surprise to literally no one, The Last of Us has sparked controversy and discourse among both the fringe and regular fan base of the series, and it's pretty much exactly as toxic and stupid as you can imagine. But in this video, I would like to spend much less time talking about that for now, and simply talk about my experience with the game, both as a gamer and a fan of the series myself. This video will be as spoiler free as I can make it, so I will mostly be talking about my overall experience with the gameplay mechanics and the story. We will talk more about the story in particular during the spoiler stream. Alright, so where do I start? Probably the tutorial. Yeah, let's start there. It's pretty straightforward. Nothing too fancy here. If you've played The Last of Us recently, then not a lot has changed. A few mechanics were added to spice things up, like the dodge button, and enemies also have a few tricks up their sleeve to keep you on your toes, like doggos and some new infected. Otherwise, the battle mechanics are largely the same, and depending on who you are, that's either great or absolutely terrible. Speaking from my own perspective, I think it's fine. I really enjoyed the gameplay and the mechanics for the first game, quirks and all, so you won't hear a lot of complaints from me in that department, although I will say that the lack of evolution in the typical gameplay loop is a bit disappointing. The dodge button is nice when it works, but it's not really game changing. And I would argue it functions more like an unnecessary QuickTime event. Most enemies will straight up tank your attacks if caught in an attack animation, forcing you to use a new dodge mechanic whenever they attack, which for me at most was slightly annoying. As far as traversing the world and exploring is concerned, I think they did a great job building a more open feeling world than they did before. Notice I used the word feeling, that was intentional. This game is still by all counts a very linear game, but the illusion that you have free reign is decently maintained. So yeah, you can't go anywhere you want, but most places that you aren't allowed to go to, you wouldn't really want to anyway, if that makes any sense. They do trick you a few times in the game with these huge expansive areas that you can openly explore, but it still requires you to hit up certain places in order to progress. These parts of the game did feel very refreshing though, and were a welcomed addition to the overall game. Other mechanics such as going prone and the clever uses of rope in the game also made things interesting, but honestly not very impactful. The rope being tossed over an obstacle to create a way to climb up something made for a clever but ultimately lackluster puzzle. Speaking of which, puzzles aren't really a thing anymore, although I would argue that they never really were. With the absolute smallest level of common sense and a little bit of spatial awareness, you can overcome pretty much any of the quote-unquote puzzles in the game fairly easily, and that's pretty much all I gotta say about that. Now, the ability to go prone in the game was rather interesting, because in the earlier half of the game, I hardly ever used it, even though it was pretty obvious that the game wanted you to at specific points. It just wasn't something that I thought about. But much later in the game, I found myself using it a lot more. And I don't really know why that is, honestly. It was a welcomed addition to the game though, particularly for stealth lovers, and I am a stealth gamer. At any game that offers stealth options, I take it. So, once again, another thing that was added that wasn't extremely impactful, but was nice to have. On that note though, it took me significantly longer to complete this game than it probably should have, because I love the stealth aspects of the game. Just the concept of clearing an entire compound unnoticed is an awesome feeling, but it's not always possible in these games. But that didn't stop me from trying every chance I got. One thing I will say though is, as opposed to The Last of Us 1, I really did enjoy the guns blazing opportunities in this game, much more than I did in the first one. Once you get your full arsenal, swapping through your weapons, the multiple weapons that you have available, and plowing through your enemies YOLO style, just seemed a lot more fun and more responsive in this game than the first one did. In fact, the combat overall seemed to function better all around, with the exception of a glitch or two or the dodge button being occasionally unreliable. While playing The Last of Us 2, I only encountered one crash and 2 minor glitches. The crash happened in a really strange place in the game during a melee combat section with the infected, and the glitches were pretty minor. Delayed reactions while interacting with the triangle button prompts and a few odd character enemy animations that, were just kind of strange. That was all I really experienced as far as issues with the game is concerned. I would like to talk a little more about some of the new enemy types in the game, but to be honest, I think those kind of fall into the realm of spoiler territory. There's not a lot, especially on the infected side, but the ones that do exist are pretty interesting, and as I said, I don't want to really give away too much because a lot of them are, well, one of them in particular is really shocking. So you'll have to check that out on your own or wait until the spoiler stream starts to get that information, because I don't really want to get into that much here. All there's really left to talk about is the crafting system and character upgrades, which are all fine. The crafting supplies works pretty much the same. Workbenches provide some cool animations when upgrading weapons, which is pretty nice. Although if I'm being honest, most of the weapon upgrades seemed pretty useless, and I ignored quite a bit of them. I don't know if anybody else encountered that, but it was definitely an issue for me. The character upgrade system is a kind of priority-based RPG-like system that makes sure you really think about what your strengths and weaknesses are, and makes you decide kind of what is going to benefit you most as a player, which I thought was a pretty good system. I thought they built that pretty well. For example, I'm a terrible shot, and I specialize in stealth and accuracy skills. While upgrading my characters, I really felt like I was tailoring both Ellie and Abby to be exactly what I wanted them to be to match my playstyle. And to be perfectly honest, since we're gonna move into that realm of conversation anyway, there wasn't a main character in this game that I did not like, which is shocking. And yes, that does include Abby, which this game is arguably more about than Best Girl Ellie. So, let's talk about the annoying elephant in the room. Is the story of this game a masterpiece or work of art? Or is it absolute garbage? The answer is surprisingly neither. Now, before I continue, I want people to remember that this is my review, and therefore this is my opinion on the game. So when I say that I think that you crazies on both fringes of this argument are absolutely incorrect about your overblown reactions, just know that that stems from my own perspective. Now, I honestly can see and really understand a lot of the praise and criticism this game has gotten, but some of y'all are really dogmatic about some of your viewpoints, and it's kinda stupid, you know? Now, that statement was mainly for the extreme people who sit out on the fringes and yell back and forth at each other over on the internet about their thoughts and views in regards to the game. So if you're offended by what I just said, then, I might be talking about you. That aside, the game's story is absolutely not a masterpiece, but neither is it dog shit. So what is it then? Well, in my humble opinion, I think it's a very engaging version of a story that we've already heard before. I think it does a very good job of telling the story that it wants to tell, and laying out the motivations of its characters. The characters are likable and relatable, and they serve as good vehicles to push forward the story that they are putting in front of us. The problem, though, is the game tends to be preachy while simultaneously contradicting the message that it is seemingly trying to put forward. The game wants you to both engage in these very horrific and extremely complicated situations, but also wants to slap you on your hand every time you do so to let you know that you are a naughty boy or girl for doing it. If I had any major complaint for the story, it is how much weight they attempt to put in the life of a single person. But while contemplating the weight and what that means, you carelessly murder dozens of people along the way. It's a very strange thing to experience, if I'm being perfectly honest. Here I am contemplating on the life of a person that I may or may not take, but on my way to making such a heavy decision, I have killed a small town worth of people just to get there. Now, I may be crazy, but I personally believe that it's a little late to be heavily contemplating that decision specifically when you are soaked in the blood of 1,000 people who you just murdered with no remorse whatsoever. It just doesn't fit to me. Just doesn't quite fit. Now, in this game, we explore themes of morality and whether or not, revenge is something worth pursuing, all kinds of stuff like that. But the game goes out of its way every time you end up doing something to have some side character either question or lecture you about the decisions that you made and if you're making the right ones or not. Yet that never stops you from continuing to dispatch people effortlessly. It's actually kind of fascinating, and one could argue that yes, if you are good enough and you figure out exactly how to do it, it is very well possible to just, I don't know, sneak your way past all those enemies and get through. But that ain't always available for you to do. It's not always a thing that's an option for you. But not to harp on that too long, and setting aside the glaring discrepancies between the cutscenes and the actual gameplay, I think they still did a very good job at telling the story that they wanted to tell, but a not so great job at staying consistent on their themes. And at the end of the day, I both enjoyed the characters and the gameplay. The story was not terrible in my opinion, nor was it amazing or groundbreaking. And oddly enough, despite all I was hearing about the game, I didn't really get a great sense of the pandering that everybody seemed to be complaining about either. Abby was Abby and Ellie was Ellie. They both gave amazing performances in my opinion, and I truly enjoyed experiencing the game from both of their perspectives. Although I have to admit that due to my bias, Abby probably overstayed her welcome just a little bit, but that's because, Ellie, she's Ellie. Like, come on, she was in the first game. Obviously, I'm gonna root for her. And there are plenty of other characters that we can talk about in this game, but to be honest, I'd rather save that for the spoiler talk. So what is my final verdict on The Last of Us 2, in my opinion? Well, I'm not a super fan of the scoring 1 through 10 system. But if I had to give it a number, I would probably say that this game is a very solid 8. No more, no less. With The Last of Us sitting at a comfortable, solid 9 out of 10 for me, I think that's a pretty good score, all things considered. I feel like I got my money's worth, and this is one of the first games in a long time that I've played when immediately after completing it, like beating the game, I wanted to go right back in and play it again. So there you guys have it. That is my spoiler-free review for The Last of Us 2. I don't usually do reviews of this caliber because I kind of suck at editing, and I am not at all great at putting forth the effort necessary to craft a comprehensive and full-blown review. But I did my best, and I tried to be as honest and objective as possible, so do me a favor and hit that like button if you enjoyed it. If you hated this review and you disagree with my viewpoints, hit that dislike button, but make sure you subscribe so you can tell me exactly how you feel when I do the live stream on this very channel, coming up either probably sometime after this video posts, or immediately afterwards. So I'll let you guys know. Just stay in touch. so that way you guys can be notified and click that bell when I do go live, because I would love to hear your opinions. I'm not one of those people who wants to throw my opinion out into the air and then plug up my ears when anybody else has something to say. I want to discuss this game because, oh boy, are there things to discuss. So I'm very interested in what you guys think. So leave me comments. Obviously, I will be responding to them. And join the live stream when it goes live. Hit that subscribe button and that bell so that way you won't miss it. Because I would like to talk to all of you guys about it. And like I said, share it. Share the video. You don't want to deprive the rest of the world of liking or hating this video, do you? Because that would be very Joel of you, if you know what I mean. But who knows, he might let you also join the club. LOL smiley face. I'm sorry about that. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one.